Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Her Resources podcast. I'm so glad to have you all here with me today. Being the reliable one feels like a compliment until you start to change, until you stop saying yes to everything, maybe until you pause before taking something on, until you start asking yourself, does this actually align with what I want? And suddenly you hear things like, you've changed, or you're not as available as you used to be. What's going on with you? And if you're honest, that can make you question everything. Am I being selfish? Am I letting people down? Am I doing the right thing? If you've been listening to the last couple of episodes, we've been talking about the hidden cost of being the reliable one and how to start to say no without feeling like you're letting everyone down. But today, we're talking about what happens next because change doesn't just happen on the outside, it happens on the inside, and it doesn't always feel good. Today, we're talking about why growth feels uncomfortable, why people respond the way they do when you change, and how to stay grounded in your decisions, even when it feels hard. So let's get into it. Welcome to the new chapter of the Her Resources podcast. I'm your host, Linda Misakadis, and I'm so excited to be stepping into this next season with you solo. This podcast has always been about amplifying women's voices, exploring the challenges we face in HR, leadership, and life, and sharing the tools and inspiration we need to thrive. And now, I'm taking that mission even deeper. You'll hear real conversations with bold and authentic women, as well as reflections from me on everything from pay equity and burnout to confidence, leadership, and the messy, beautiful journey of growth. This is more than just a podcast, it's a community, a space for us to learn, lead, and lift each other up. Welcome to this new beginning. This is the Her Resources podcast. Let's get started. Here's what I've learned, and maybe you felt this too. The hardest part isn't realizing that you need to change. I mean, I've recognized this for a long time, so this wasn't a new idea that I needed to change. And it's not even like saying no for the first time, because we've all done that. Like we've all made that decision. I'm going to say no this time, and I'm going to be perfectly okay with that. But maybe you only did it that one time. It's not a change in how you approach things. The hardest part, though, is what happens after. It's the moment where you start doing things differently and it doesn't feel natural yet. So think about that first time you said no. How uncomfortable did that make you feel? Or when you maybe approach something in a different way than you have in the past, it made you feel uncomfortable. Or maybe worse yet, maybe you felt guilty or you felt unsure. And then you start to wonder to yourself, have I gone too far? Like, have I changed too much? And this is where most people start to go back. So we start to backpedal in our whole approach. We're like, oh, maybe that was a mistake. So we get back to saying yes, we get back to overcommitting, and we get back to being the person everyone expects us to be. But not because it's right, but because it's familiar. And again, this isn't a blame game. This isn't about the people in our lives and their fault. This is on us. This is about self awareness and taking responsibility for ourselves and not falling back into those old patterns. But there's something I really want to normalize for you. The discomfort that you're feeling, it's actually not a sign that something is wrong. It's actually a sign that something is changing. And that's weird. And that's what makes us really kind of feel uncomfortable. So I consulted with the experts. Dr. Susan David talks about this in her work on emotional agility. And one of the things she says is that our emotions are data, not directives. I thought, that's really kind of interesting. But what does that mean? Well, the meaning of it is just because you feel something doesn't mean you have to act on it. And that's kind of hard for us sometimes. And that hit me because I realized how many times I've felt uncomfortable and immediately tried to fix it. By saying yes, by overcommitting, by going back to what felt familiar. But what if instead of reacting to the discomfort, we got curious about it? My former co host, Cindy Manuel, always loved to say this. She loves the whole idea of getting curious, being curious. So, what if we asked, why does this feel hard? What am I actually afraid of here? And what pattern am I breaking? Because I know for me, I've realized that a lot of my discomfort wasn't about the situation itself. It was actually about disappointing other people. It was it wasn't about me. It wasn't about being seen in the same way. It was about stepping out of a role I had played for such a long time. And Susan David talks about this idea that growth requires us to sit with emotions we'd rather avoid. And man, I can say I've been avoiding those emotions for a very long time, but not fix them, not push them away, but sit with them long enough to make a conscious choice. So, again, we kind of talked a little bit about that before around taking that pause. So, the next time you feel that discomfort, instead of immediately going back to yes, use the pause and remind yourself this feeling doesn't mean I'm wrong. It might just mean I'm growing. And that's kind of cool. Now, let's talk about something that for me was probably the hardest part, other people's reactions. Because when you change how you show up, people do notice, and not always in the way you expect. I know for me, sometimes I make a change or I do something different, and people will notice, but maybe it's not the reaction that I want. And sometimes that makes me frustrated because I'm like, well, how did you not notice that I was doing this differently or, or that I changed and that somehow that one small change is a pattern shift and that everything is going to be different going forward? And that's just not true either. But Dr. Henry Cloud, he talks about this in his book, Boundaries. He explains that when you change your boundaries, people are going to test that. That's just natural. That's human nature. And when I first heard that, I remember thinking, oh, great. So this is just going to get harder before it gets easier. Because sometimes it's much easier for us to sit in the discomfort of where we are than it is to actually make the changes that we say we want to make. But are we really committed to doing them? So the more I sat with it, the more I realized it's not that people are trying to be difficult. It's just that they're used to a version of you that maybe made things easier for them. And when that changes, there's friction. And I felt this personally. The moment you don't immediately say yes, and this is mostly at work, that when you don't immediately say yes, that moment that you pause, or maybe you say, I can't take that on right now, there's a pause on the other end. And sometimes it's subtle, sometimes it's, "Oh, okay," because they're so used to you just immediately saying yes. And sometimes it can be even more direct. Maybe, "Well, you've always done it before." I mean, how many times have we all heard that one? And that's the moment where it's really easy to backtrack because now we might be uncomfortable. Now we feel like we're disappointing. And so now we feel like we need to explain or we need to justify or maybe we need to soften it. But Henry Cloud makes something really clear. You are responsible to people, not for people. I want to say that one more time because I thought that was really powerful. You are responsible to people, not for people. What does that really mean? Well, it means you can care about someone and you can respect them. You can value that relationship without taking responsibility for their reaction. Their reaction is their reaction. Their emotions are their emotions. You're not responsible for those. And that was a big shift for me because I realized I wasn't just saying yes to help. I was saying yes to avoid discomfort in how someone else might feel. I didn't want to make them feel bad, or I didn't want them to feel like I was disappointing them, or maybe, I didn't want them to think that I wasn't the reliable one anymore. And when you start to separate those two things, you start to show up differently. So if you're experiencing pushback right now, if people are questioning the new version of you, that doesn't mean you're doing something wrong. It just means the dynamic is changing, and change takes time for everyone. I have exciting news. The Her Resources podcast is opening sponsorships. If your brand supports women in HR and leadership, think talent, well being, learning, pay equity, coaching, productivity, or mission driven tech. This is your moment. Our listeners are decision makers and change makers who show up for real conversations and practical tools every week. We offer flexible options, pre-roll or mid-roll host reads, series sponsorships, and thought leadership integrations that highlight your story without the fluff. Ready to connect with a highly engaged audience and grow with us? Email contact@herresourcespodcast.com and put sponsorship in the subject line. I can't wait to collaborate. This is bigger than just behavior, though. This is about identity. And I want to pause here for a second because I think this is something a lot of us have heard before, but maybe we haven't fully connected to our own lives. I know I haven't. Somebody asked me the other day about this, about how do I define my identity? So many people have read Habits by James Clear. Maybe recently it's resurfaced. I know it's back and a lot of people are really referencing Atomic Habits again, or maybe it was a few years ago. So you've probably heard the idea that your habits shape your identity. But have you really stopped and thought about what that actually means? I know I didn't. Especially in moments like this, because this isn't just about building better habits. This is about becoming a better version of yourself. James Clear talks about how every action you take is a vote for the type of person you want to become. And when I really sat with that, it kind of changed things for me because saying no, that's not just a one time decision. That's a vote. It's a vote for being someone who protects their time. It's a vote for being someone who is intentional. It's a vote for someone who doesn't automatically put everyone else first. And I'll be honest, that doesn't feel natural at first because for so many of us, and for so many of us are, and for so long, honestly, our default vote had been yes. Yes to helping, yes to taking things on, yes to being the person everyone could count on. So when I started choosing differently, it felt like I was going against who I had always been. And I'm not there yet. So I'm not telling you about all of this because I've made this miraculous shift in my behavior. I'm still going through this change as well. But what I learned, the truth is, I wasn't going against myself. I am becoming someone new. And that's the part we don't always talk about. When you change your behavior, you're asking your brain and everyone around you to catch up to a new identity. And that's hard. So it makes sense that it feels uncomfortable, not just for you, but for the people around you, because you're not just doing something different, you're becoming someone different. And that space in between, that's where the discomfort actually lives. So let's kind of bring it all together. I want to take a minute and, we've talked a lot about a lot of different things and a lot of different concepts. But what does this actually look like in your life? Whether you're at work, maybe it's at home, or you lead a team, or maybe you're just trying to show up differently for you. And that's okay too. This doesn't have to be about everyone else. Remember, this is about you. Because here's something I want to remind you of. Leadership isn't a title. You don't always have to be a manager. You don't have to be in a formal role. You can be an individual contributor. You can be leading your household. Leadership is how you show up. So let's make this real. When you feel discomfort after saying no, that's Susan David. This is data, not a directive. And when people react, well, that's Henry Cloud. I'm responsible to people, not for them. And when you're deciding whether to say yes or no, well, that's James Clear. What kind of person am I becoming with this particular choice? And when you communicate it clearly, well, that's Brené Brown. She talks about clear is kind. This is what leadership looks like. It's not a title, it's a choice. I want to bring this all home with something that sits at the center of all of this. If you want real change to stick, you have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And that's hard for some of us. I know it's hard for me. I don't like being uncomfortable because this moment right here, this is where everything can go one of two ways. You either go backward or you stay with it. And honestly, that's hard because our instinct is to fix our discomfort, not to sit in it. But discomfort isn't something to fix, it's something to move through. It's a moment in time because every time you stay with it, you reinforce the change. You start to build trust in yourself, which is so important, especially, as we're making these good changes. We really want to trust ourselves and know that we're moving in the right direction for us. And actually over time, that becomes your new normal. This is where the change actually starts to happen. Not when it feels easy, but when you choose to stay anyway. So if you take nothing else from today's episode, take this. Discomfort is a sign of growth, not failure. People will react when you change. Be prepared for that. I think that's important because we sometimes forget that or we underestimate the fact that people are going to react when you change and understand that's normal. I mean, that's just, again, that's human nature. We're going to react when something feels differently, looks differently. It's just the reality. And you are becoming someone new, one decision at a time. Leadership is about how you show up. It's not about your title. And if you want change to stick, well, you have to stay in the uncomfortable long enough for it to become your new normal. Hey everyone, we're the Her Resources podcast, where women share real stories, real lessons, and the resources that help them succeed. We're always looking for inspiring women, business leaders, creatives, educators, and changemakers who want to share their journey and empower others. If that sounds like you, we'd love to hear your story. Reach out to us at contact@herresourcespodcast.com and let's start the conversation. If this episode hit home for you, I want you to take one small step this week. The next time something feels uncomfortable, instead of immediately trying to fix it, I want you to pause. And then I want you to remind yourself this is where the change happens. Because getting comfortable with being uncomfortable, that's the work. That's how you really grow. I've talked about this in some of our other episodes that we get very caught up sometimes in that if we read the book, we listen to the podcast, we watch the webinar, that it just happens, right? That the change happens. I don't know how we think it's magically going to happen, but it takes work. And that's the hard part. But honestly, that is how you grow. Because reading a book isn't enough. Listening to this podcast isn't enough. It's what are you willing to do to make those changes? Because that's how you become the version of yourself you've been trying to step into. I know sometimes we'll get frustrated. We're like, man, I keep, I've read all the books, I've done this, I've done that, and nothing changes. Well, nothing changes because you're not changing. You're not doing the work that it takes to actually get to where you want to be. It's a great reminder I have to bring to myself as well, because sometimes I get lost in that as well. So if you like today's episode, make sure you like, follow, and share the Her Resources podcast with someone who needs to hear this message. And I want to thank you for being a part of the Her Resources podcast community. It truly means so much, and I love to hear from all of you, and I love it when you comment on the episodes. So make sure you're following the show so you don't miss what's coming next, because in the next episode, we're going to talk about something that shows up right alongside this: over explaining and why you don't owe everyone a justification. And as always, we'll link all of the experts and the books we've referenced in the show notes so that you can dive deeper and do the work. So I'll see you in the next episode. And thanks, everyone. You've been listening to the Her Resources podcast, where women's voices, leadership, and growth take center stage. As your host, I'm here to remind you that the journey isn't always easy, but it is always worth it. Every step you take to build confidence, create impact, or use your voice is part of a much bigger story. It's the one that inspires others to do the same. If this episode spoke to you, I'd love it if you subscribed, left a review, or shared it with another woman who's ready to step into her power. And as always, thank you for being a part of this community. Together, we're not just changing conversations, we're changing the future.